Hi, everyone. On election night last Tuesday, the country saw a full-on blue wave, a series of dramatic wins for Democrats and significant losses for conservatives. So it's kind of hard to believe that just a few days later, Democrats in Congress folded.
What just happened in the Senate chamber was an absolute disgrace. I can't stress it enough. I'm just so pissed off. And just what's going to happen to so many people.
You just heard New Jersey Senator Andy Kim's reaction on CNN. The government shutdown is over. And the Democratic strategy in all of this? Questionable. The healthcare subsidies Democrats were fighting to extend are still very much set to expire at the end of this year. And those tax credits would have prevented millions of people, like Lindsay, who we spoke to last week, from paying 2 to 3 times what they currently do for health insurance. By way of an explanation for this, the 8 Democrats who defected to end the shutdown pointed to Donald Trump's punishment of federal workers and people who take airplanes, and also the 42 million Americans who receive food stamps.
I got the first good night's sleep last night that I've gotten since October 1, because I wasn't worried about being able to look Capitol Police in the eye when I walked in, or what a furloughed federal worker would say to me at church, or what somebody would say to me about their SNAP benefits.
Now, Democrats say the fight on healthcare isn't over, and maybe it isn't. Maybe voters will blame Republicans for the turmoil and take their anger to the 2026 voting booth. But no matter how you look at it, the Democrats, the party in Congress, blinked in the middle of a standoff with the biggest bully in the country, Donald Trump. So what does that say about the Democratic Party and its leadership, and what happens in future fights against that very same opponent? I'm Alex Wagner, and this week on Runaway Country, we're going to talk about bullies. In an age of extremism, what does it mean to have real backbone? Democrats caved to the country's authoritarian in chief, Donald Trump, while a good share of Trump's own party is now apparently submitting to Nazis. And nobody knows that better than socialist and Twitch streamer, political commentator, and Gen Z mascot Hasan Piker, who devotes a fair amount of his day to calling out the bigotry within the ranks of the Republican Party, and who knows a thing or two about bully culture.
If you have developed a movement off of shitting on every marginalized group, and that is your North Star, as it is the Republicans, why wouldn't they also do that to the Jews?
But first, I'm sitting down with Morris Katz, Zohran Mamdani's 26-year-old political advisor. Morris was one of the key players in Mamdani's landslide victory last week, particularly among younger voters. He has been right in the middle of the fight between the Democratic establishment and its new wave of insurgents, and he remains in the middle of that fight. Morris is also an advisor to Graham Platner's Senate campaign, whose race in Maine has not been free of, well, all kinds of controversy. Morris and I chatted about why the Democrats caved this week, what it means to have backbone in the age of Trump, and what the next generation of Democrats is going to demand of its leaders, whether they like it or not. Morris Katz, it's a thrill. Thank you, and welcome to Runaway Country.
Thanks so much for having me, Alex.
So much of this moment politically feels like it's a story of backbone and who has it and who doesn't. And I want to start with the shutdown, or the unshutdown, or the cave, or whatever you want to call it this week. Just give me your initial reaction to, the news on Sunday night that 8 Democrats had freelanced across the aisle.
Well, yeah, one, I think the kind of freelance thing it's amusing watching Chuck Schumer suddenly decide that this is the moment he doesn't actually control the caucus after an entire brand of decades built on his...
Right, that rowdy Jean Shaheen.
Yes, exactly.
Can't control her anymore.
It's, insane. And I was, like, my favorite shutdown point, I think you actually are the person who said this, and I'm stealing this from you now, quoting it back to you, which I'm sure makes great content. But was the, why aren't we owning the shutdown?
Yeah.
We should have just from the start been like, yes, we are shutting the government down to keep your healthcare costs low, to keep you enrolled in healthcare, and owned it. And from there, immediately we were in an apologetic stance. And that's no way to start a fight. And then I think further, it kind of exists in this role, and I've been thinking about this a lot, of we need to change who we are as a party in the way we think about government. It's like we still are in the era of big government is over phase and are apologetic about anything the government's doing. And then when you go into these conversations, it's like our entire framing is how can we delay government harm? How can we, what's the least we can do to hurt working people, instead of any kind of active vision for how these conversations should take place. This should be a conversation of what can we do to transform the lives of people. If we want to talk about SNAP benefits, let's talk about a plan to lift everyone up from needing SNAP benefits in the first place. The idea that we are winning something by potentially delaying and increasing a little bit of accountability to score electoral points on people losing their health care is indicative of a party without a vision.
Well, I mean, I think you could also just term it in really schoolyard dynamics, which is they've allowed themselves to be bullied into defense. It's just you are part of one campaign, and you have been part of two campaigns that are remarkably on offense, right? Zohran Mamdani and Graham Platner, and are kind of unapologetic in their stances in all of their politics. And, just as characters on the stage, there's very little kind of kneeling, if you will. I do have to ask you, though, given your CV, you helped run the campaign of John Fetterman, who was one of the 8 who was, an architect of this cave. And I wonder if you have thoughts about that and whether there's anything you can tell us about sort of how you look at that candidacy and the candidates you're working for or have worked for in the recent past.
I think that, John Fetterman ran to be the 51st vote. That was right. The core line, the 51st vote to do all of these great things, not the 51st vote to side with Republicans to take healthcare away from people. And I think that for a variety of reasons, I can't speak to what's happened in governing as I worked on the campaign. It feels like the governing has looked very different than the campaign. And I think that at the end of the day, Senator Fetterman's still someone who was a politician before running for office, who was, not necessarily accepted by the political class, but had, that in his DNA, a complicated baggage and relationships with the political system and status quo politicians. And so I think there's I think the similarities between Graham Platner and John Fetterman kind of end at them both having tattoos and occasionally wearing sweatshirts.
Yeah, right. But do you worry at all, though, that it's not a function of inherent sort of it's not a backbone that you're born with. It's one that develops as a result of your surroundings and your inputs. And once you get into actual governance, that atrophies. I mean, I guess it's nobody I guess maybe Fetterman went in there I'm going to be the 51st vote. And that probably means I'm going to be, at some points I'm going to be pulled to the right. I very few people go in there to be moderates.
Yeah, I think that's right. I do think that there's the problem, and I think everyone sees this, when you see these politicians go in and they spend all day once they're in Washington just meeting with lobbyists, meeting with donors, meeting with
each other. I mean, even if they're not taking, money from lobbyists, they're spending a lot of time jabbering at each other.
Absolutely. It's it is, Dan Osborne likes to say, the Senate's a country club of millionaires who just do what billionaires tell them. Right. And I think that it's absolutely correct. And I think part of what we need more of is we need more reluctant candidates. I always say, I'm if you're someone who wants to be in the United States Senate, you have something wrong with you. You should feel this is the last thing I want to do, but I feel an obligation to go do it. And I think that kind of helps with that framing of, if you go into the Senate kind of worshiping the altar of whatever the, kind of institution of the Senate is, then you're very destined to fall into those traps you're laying out. If you're someone who's going into it with the perspective of these are a bunch of fucking losers and I'm embarrassed to be here, but I'm going to do my best, then I think we're starting something to work with.
God, that's so interesting, because it's these are a bunch of losers, which is kind of Trump's attitude towards the American public, but certainly towards his own party, right? You guys are a bunch of losers. You fucking need me, and you're welcome for everything I'm giving you. And it sounds like you think Democrats need to be less concerned about sort of being offensive and being, disgusted at the dynamics within their own party.
I mean, we have a party of people who didn't sit at the cool kids table, and it comes through, and we're haunted by it every single day in Washington. And then it's they now kind of think that this might be, and so there's just we're just happy to be here kind of mentality, versus what the approach should be, which is this is a horrible place, and I'm going to do everything in my power to change it, change the way Washington functions, change who we listen to, change the way we talk, change what we fight for.
I want to ask you specifically about you're like right in the thick of all of this, right? And you were senior advisor to the Mamdani campaign. You guys are right at the crosshairs of the Democratic establishment being, proving their own irrelevance. It took so long to get leadership, Democratic leadership in Congress and Democratic leadership from New York State to come on board. Did that matter to you? Or you were like, oh yeah, we're not being kept up at night due to a lack of a Hakeem Jeffries endorsement?
I was certainly not. I was losing sleep for a lot of reasons. The lack of a Hakeem Jeffries endorsement was not one of them. And I think we saw, and this is like a broader thing that applies to a lot of the way we talk about these different races in the progressive wing of the party, is, in our polling, Zohran was more popular in a general election electorate than a lot of these individuals who the kind of pundit class was obsessed with how they were going to move or not. And we see the same thing with the way Bernie Sanders is talked about, with the way AOC is talked about. When you look at the actual polling, they're far more popular. And even it's been floated, the concept of leadership staying out because Zohran's a liability in swing districts. Zohran is more popular than the very people making those decisions to not want to be tagged with him. Like, if someone's wants to run an effective attack ad in a swing district, they're going to run it tying the candidate to Chuck Schumer, not tying the candidate to Zohran Mamdani via Chuck Schumer. And I think there's kind of this myth that's really just people telling on themselves for their discomfort with the candidates. It doesn't reflect the will of the people. But we also saw in the Democratic primary a historic turnout, a historic margin of victory in the face of a Democratic establishment that decided they were comfortable embracing a sexual predator who covered up the murder of a bunch of seniors. Yet, Muslim Democratic Socialist was a step too far.
We're looking in the past with Mamdani. He obviously won by a large margin and is going to be the next mayor of New York City. You're also working on the Graham Platner campaign. And when we talk about Democrats being free to be themselves, being unabashed in the mistakes they've made and embracing the mistakes they've made and, presenting themselves to the American public, warts and all, as a sort of like indicator of conviction. My question to you is there a line? Like, first of all, can you be too precious about a Nazi tattoo?
Well, look, what it is, when he got it, thinking it was a skull and crossbones tattoo, and obviously there's been a lot that's kind of, discourse that's taken place around it, and he's gotten the tattoo covered up and, apologized for, Reddit statements and any hurt that could have come from the tattoo. But I think the kind of where I come down on this is I think Graham Platner would be an unbelievable U.S. Senator. I think he will be an unbelievable U.S. Senator. I think he's a voice we need in the party. And I also think we need to move past the place where someone like me should be allowed to decide if Graham Platner is electable. And I think we have this this culture of backroom politics in the party, where it tends to be five assholes in Washington deciding who's electable, who's a good candidate in Maine. And why are we going to let the same people who picked Sarah Gideon to lose by 12 points tell us who our nominee should be this time? That's an insane theory. And if people think it's unelectable, then it's this good thing that we have Democratic primaries where voters can tell us what they think about it. And the idea of it's just, to me, it's so deeply condescending to voters for Washington to try to dictate electability concerns. And that's where so much of it's coming from.
Yeah, for people who are unfamiliar, Janet Mills, the governor of the state, is the pick of Chuck Schumer and much of the Democratic establishment because they think she's a formidable fighter, which, with all due respect, she did, come for Trump inside the White House and said, "I'll see you in court." And that was a badass moment. And it's in a campaign ad, but is seen, that race is equally seen as one of sort of like the centrist established moderates versus the upstart, the insurgent, and someone with a complicated past, if not a checkered past. And I guess, you say that the Democratic primary voters should be the ones to decide. But do you think we are at a moment right now where Democrats generally need to and can get more comfortable with offense, both like the posture and being offended?
Absolutely. I think people are looking and craving authenticity, and there's just more transparency that's required than ever before in running for office. And no one is perfect. And no one expects authenticity to mean that someone has never made a mistake, that someone has never said something they don't regret. And especially as we have a new generation that's going to start running, where so much of it is going to be online. So much of it's going to be captured somewhere on some platform. And I think people want to see themselves reflected in those seeking to represent them. And people are self-aware enough to know that they too have said things they regret, that they too have gone through dark periods. You know, Graham has talked about a lot of this in the context of his PTSD, in the context of his depression, this being not the person he is anymore. And people see that, and they see, you know, whether they said the same things or got the same tattoos, or they see their own themselves in that, the things that they wish they hadn't said, their own moments of struggle. And I think that's a politics we can all be excited about, particularly when like every editorial page wants to write 90 papers on how do we win back young men who are, you know, the right is taking on online platforms and other places. And Graham is literally this person who was in those places, who was on those Reddit threads, who's come out the other side, who's uniquely equipped to communicate on these things, to be a messenger to bring those people back. And we shouldn't be apologetic about having candidates who've evolved, who've changed, and who can build the very coalitions we claim we want to.
I guess I wonder whether that's, I mean, so you're saying voters crave authenticity. They crave shared experience, or people who can speak to the like lives that they've lived. But I also feel like it's a requirement in the age of Trump, right? Like if you're going to punch the bully in the nose, you got to know how to take a swing, to use a very heavy-handed metaphor. You know what I mean? Like you got to be able to just like live with the consequences of your actions and not feel apologetic about them in order to take on what is the greatest threat to democracy in my lifetime and probably in, you know, modern American history.
Absolutely. I think like Graham has to stick with our schoolyard bully metaphor, which we're really leaning into here. Is I think like Graham is someone who would kick the shit out of Donald Trump and would not do it to make friends, would not do it because he thought he could not get in trouble, but would do it because he thought it's the right thing to do. And I think that that's what people can, that authenticity comes through. And just the reality is most people who are like that are also not people who, when they were 7, thought that they wanted to be a U.S. senator. Right. And so we just need to decide, like, are we going to allow the U.S. Senate and our party to continue to be run by people who were too busy planning their presidential campaigns to sit at the cool kids table? Or are we okay having some like real people who actually have lived real lives run for office, knowing that that doesn't mean everything's been perfect?
Right. Who weren't trying to sit at the cool kids table, who were like outside, I don't know, setting cars on fire or something. Would you do that in high school? I don't know. I wonder in the context of the shutdown and the fallout out of the shutdown, what do you think needs to happen inside Democratic ranks? I think you told the New York Times that the general election campaign for Mamdani was a story of a constant friction between trying to unite a party and not lose a populist edge. I wonder if there's just not, that there's an inherent contradiction in all of that, and whether these things can all exist under the same tent. You know, like, do you think Chuck Schumer is going to be the minority leader for much longer? How do you have a group of people who are so loath to be confrontational that they will not sacrifice anything that Drake Durbin voted to end the shutdown. He's leaving the Senate, right? Like, it would have been the easiest thing in the world for him to just sit on the sidelines, right? How do you have a party that can be at once, you know, aggressive and authentic and truly itself, warts and all, and a sort of a governing structure that is steeped in right and tradition and moderation?
So like if I was able to control the powers that be in DC, which I now in some ways I guess infamously cannot, I would have called Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and AOC and these people who can draw huge crowds and said, let's take this tour on the road together as a united Democratic front and talk about what is on the line with this shutdown and make our case to the American public. And I would have, you know, if I'm them, I would have asked for Chuck Schumer to be there, for Dick Durbin to be there, and control the narrative. Mm-hmm. And I think what happened here is you saw no one step up, other than like Senator Sanders tried, a few tried, but there was no coherent message unifying the Democrats in their opposition, which makes it so easy to fold when there's nothing kind of holding you up. And instead, if we were having rallies with 40,000 people every 3 days talking about the Republican assault on healthcare, then you have a party united. And like, one thing politicians love is big crowds and TV cameras. And when you have 50,000 people chanting, don't end the shutdown or whatever.
Yeah. Stand tall or stand tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that gives the backbone. But because we treat our most popular leaders like they're plights on the party, then we leave ourselves devoid of any vision or of any backbone.
They can still do that. I mean, by the way, the healthcare issue hasn't been resolved, and maybe it's not Chuck Schumer who's out there, but I'm of the mind that they should be going on the road and they should be talking about Trump and his cruelty and sadism as it concerns the health and welfare and financial stability of the American people, like all the time. They have a very practical example when they get their healthcare premium bills next January. So it's not like the story ends.
No, and I think it's also something they don't understand about modern media, where those rallies aren't just rallies that then go on cable news and broadcast news and show mass support for the messaging. It becomes 50,000 different hits. Everyone in their phone has a phone up, clips it. It's on TikTok. It's on Instagram. It's in the algorithm. It's going viral. People are seeing it everywhere. And you create an echo chamber of your message instead of like the DC messaging strategy, which is like, give a press conference every day and take like a week swing at Trump with like, and hand out some fact sheets to the DC press corps, which isn't exactly the kind of a meet the moment strategy of persuasion.
Maybe they need to do like a healthcare premiums like scavenger hunt. I'm just borrowing from Mamdani tactic during the 2025 campaign. Morris Katz explaining to Democrats what the fuck is wrong with them and what the fuck they need to start doing. We'll see if they like take you up on any of it.
They can join us at the Cool Kids table, Alex.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely I'm in detention probably if we're talking about where everybody went. That's not true. I was a nerd. I was probably in study hall, not even eating, just starving, eating the food of academia, whatever that means. I'm sorry that this was so filled with schoolyard metaphors, Morris, but I appreciate you playing ball, so to speak.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Alex.
Thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate it.
When we come back, we are going to put all of this in context with Hasan Piker and ask if anyone's ready to punch the bullies in the nose, proverbially speaking. Over the last month, thousands of federal workers went without pay because of the government shutdown. With paychecks on hold, many families are still struggling to put food on the table. That is why the labor force is stepping up. They've been distributing grocery cards to help federal employees and their families buy the basics, things like peanut butter and jelly, lunch for the kids, and dinners for the week. But the demand, as you can imagine, is still overwhelming. Over 1 million federal workers were affected by the shutdown, and the labor force has had to pause new requests until more donations come in. You can make a real difference today. A $10 gift helps buy essentials, $50 covers lunches for 2 kids for a week, and $250 fills a family's grocery cart. Go to thelaborforce.org/crooked to donate and help reopen the program for families still waiting. That's thelaborforce.org/crooked. Let's make sure no family goes hungry. Runaway Country is brought to you by Fable. As someone who actually uses the things in my home every day, I've gotten pickier about what stays on my table. Seriously. If there's like a mismatched mug, I don't need it. I don't want it. Throw it away. I want unified tableware. I want it to look good. I want it to be functional. I kind of want it to be Fable. Fable makes modern minimalist homeware that is actually built to last. Think beautiful ceramics that are dishwasher safe, non-toxic, ethically made, and surprisingly sturdy. I say that with a 6 and 8-year-old in my house. They partner with artisans in Portugal and use recycled and locally sourced clay. So it's not just good looking, it's good for the planet too. Even takeout looks better on these plates. I can vouch for that. If you're hosting this season or just elevating your everyday meals, this is an easy way to make things feel more special. Put the sweet green on it. Just do it. Fable's glassware is just as thoughtfully made. It's made in Japan, and even though it's super thin, sort of terrifyingly super thin and lightweight, it happens to be ion toughened, which means it's nearly twice as durable as typical glass, and it is scratch resistant. It's non-toxic, it's dishwasher safe, holla, and it feels amazing in your hand. And the pieces are lead and cadmium safe and free of other harmful toxins and chemicals. Fable's also a certified B Corp, which means they meet the highest standards for sustainability, ethics, and transparency. From plastic-free packaging to ethical production, they are thinking about the impact behind every single piece, not just how it looks. So check out fable.com and don't miss their Black Friday sale, which is running until the end of November. That's fable.com/crooked. As the Democratic Party managed some internal combustion this week, the Republican Party was experiencing a watershed moment of its own. Tucker Carlson, the Wizard of Oz for the GOP, who hosts one of the most popular conservative podcasts in the country, had far-right activist Nick Fuentes on his show for a very friendly interview.
I'm sorry I called you gay, by the way, but I'm always, I think I'm just too old or something. I'm like, why isn't anyone married? You tell me, why aren't people married?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's the women. The women are extremely liberal. No one talks about that. They're increasingly they do, especially after the last election. There's a 45-point difference between men and women. The men are extremely conservative, increasingly. The women are extremely liberal.
What are they liberal on? What issues? Like, what does that mean, liberal?
Oh, they're very feminist.
Like, actually?
Extremely feminist, yes.
They don't believe that, do they?
I think they do.
Really?
Absolutely,
yes. How could you believe that?
Nobody knows the inside of a woman's brain like Nick Fuentes. Now, for those of you fortunate enough not to be familiar with this man, here's just a taste.
Hitler was a pedophile and kind of a pagan. It's like, well, he was also really fucking cool. You know, enough with the Jim Crow stuff. Who cares? Oh, to drink out of a different water fountain. Big fucking deal. People would say, are you against all immigration or just for non-white people? And you'd say, no, I think we should have no immigration from anywhere. Even from what? It's just enough. And now it's kind of like, no, we could use some more white people.
If you find those views appalling, then you may be surprised to learn that the president of the Heritage Foundation think tank, which is a pillar of the Republican establishment, the president resolutely and repeatedly defended Tucker Carlson for platforming Fuentes.
The Heritage Foundation didn't become the intellectual backbone of the conservative movement by canceling our own people or policing the consciences of Christians.
All of this didn't so much set off as it did expose a schism within the Republican Party between those outraged that a neo-Nazi is making moves towards becoming a legitimate voice in the movement and everyone else who is either scared of getting on Tucker Carlson's bad side or actually agrees with him, and Nick Fuentes. Our second guest, Hasan Piker, believes that anti-Semitism, and maybe bigotry more broadly, is intrinsic to the goals of the right. And a party that has shown a weakness for strong men and a real desire to platform bullies is now getting mighty friendly with an ideology that only a few years ago was synonymous with pure evil. Here's my conversation with Hasan Piker at CrookedCon in Washington, D.C. Thanks for doing this.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
I've been thinking about you in the context of some of the news we've gotten recently, particularly around, I don't know if you've been following what's going on at the Heritage Foundation. And
I've been following.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I love right-wing infighting. This is the most dangerous type of right-wing infighting, though, because it does seem like it's the inevitable forces of anti-Semitism are winning.
Yeah.
But it's still, I'm still going to let them fight position right now.
Seems bad. Let them stay at it.
Yeah, good. Keep having these arguments.
You were on NPR talking about just how much Nazism and anti-Semitism is legitimately a sort of like organizing principle on the far right with younger white conservatives. And I kind of wonder, between what's happening at Heritage, the text messages between young Republican leaders talking about Hitler, Trump's nominee saying he has, Nazi tendencies. Can you, first of all, I'm sure you feel validated.
I thought you were talking about J.D. Vance for a second.
Well, it's hard,
or RFK
it's hard
Jr.?
to know.
Were you talking about RFK Jr.
It's hard to
who
know.
said Trump has Nazi tendencies? Because they both did that.
What?
Big Tent.
Can you talk a little bit about what you think that's about?
I mean, yeah, this is like the most principled maximalist position of reactionary politics is always inevitably going to arrive at fascism. That's what it is. If we are to assume that the left flank position in this country in its most like aggressive version, or its logical conclusion, is like something resembling socialism on socialist principles, even though the Democratic Party is a liberal party, and I think it is inherently antagonistic towards that. The maximalist position of right-wing forces is inevitably going to be fascism. Fascism restores stability and order without actually harming the material pecking order in terms of the class structure that exists under capitalism. The wealthy continue to retain their wealth, of course, as long as they don't end up in this expansionist, endless militarism, and then they end up failing by force, as we've seen. But that is at the heart of fascism, and that has always been at the heart of the Republican Party. And for years and years, I think people said, "Oh, you're exaggerating. Oh, you're exaggerating." And the reality of the matter is that that is its most that is the fundamental organizing principle of white supremacy, and that has played a major role in the Republican Party. So it was an inevitability that we would arrive at this moment, and so that's where we're at now.
So you're saying it's kind of foundational to conservatism, right?
For sure.
And maybe has been for decades. But it feels like this current iteration of especially young people embracing it, maybe the gateway drug was like own the libs, say the most offensive thing you can, which is like praise for Hitler, praise for Nazis, see if you can get a reaction. But what seems now clear is that it's not just about owning the libs anymore. It really is about a fundamental interest in, if not actual embrace of the Third Reich.
Yeah.
First of all, what do you think the conversation around that should be from progressives and Democrats who are, I think, rightfully alarmed about a sizable portion of the Republican Party being enamored of Hitler?
Yeah. So this is something I've been ringing the alarm bells on for quite a while. I think my thing was like any Republican staffer under the age of 35 is usually going to be a groyper, or going to have at least like some kind of sympathies towards like historical fascist movements, right? And we saw that with like the Ron DeSantis campaign, for example. Like Ron DeSantis was supposed to be the establishment Republican answer to Donald Trump and Trumpism in general. They were fearful that he was causing there to be some electoral defeats when he was on the ticket, right? Or at least was like associated with a ticket. And the Koch brother, and the rest of the establishment on the Republican side tried to find an answer in Ron DeSantis. It was a failure, but even then, his campaign was staffed with young Republicans that were putting the Sonnenrad on the black sun, which is Nazi symbolism, on the background of his campaign material. It was insane, right? So they've been actively trying to do subtle nods and gestures in that direction for quite a while, but now there's like an open embrace of it, and I think part of that is because of Israel, for sure. And the other reason why there's an open embrace of it is because if your movement revolves around constantly saying the most heinous thing you could possibly say, and that's your ideological movement, right? That's at the heart of your ideological movement, whether it be black people, brown people. Why did anybody think that like Jews would be spared in that situation? Like, of course, they're going to inevitably tackle that aspect of it as well, which is why I've always been shocked by the likes of Mark Levin, David Horowitz, Ben Shapiro, conservative Jews that have been at the heart of this movement, or even like the entirety of the neocon class that thought that if they just hyper-focused on Islamophobia and justify the war on terror by doing that no one would actually ever turn around and be like, hold on, you're also not like a white Christian.
Exactly.
Especially because it's the oldest version of bigotry. It's the most resilient, most successful version of bigotry that it always blew my mind. The reason why I bring up Mark Levin is because Nick Fuentes did the Tucker Carlson interview. Yeah. And I think that's more so just a signal that this is the Republican Party basically heading in that direction. This is their version of populism. And in that interview, Nick Fuentes actually said, I learned about the Great Replacement from Mark Levin. Yeah. And it's like, Mark, who do you think the Nazis blame for that? They blamed the Jews, big dog. Why did you think that this wasn't inevitably going to turn on you?
I mean, some people have asked, oh, is this the schism inside the Republican Party? And I would ask you, what's on the other side of it? Like, what's the counterpoint to the fascist tendencies inside the Republican Party? Because I certainly don't see it.
Yeah, because you can't build a movement where you're like, we hate DEI except for Jews. Like, you can't do that, because that comes across as like insane to the average onlooker, right? You're like, what am I supposed to think? I'm a white boy, corn-fed Arkansas, okay? And I'm looking at the television. I'm seeing stuff on my social media feed where it's like, this is crazy, this is heinous, what's going on in Gaza? And then I'm looking at the TV and I'm like, I'm a Trump voter, and I loved everything that he was saying about, like, brown people being scary and killing people, black people being dangerous, low IQ, all this stuff. But then that same administration is turning around and being like, except if you say anything about Israel, not even about Jewish people in general, but just about Israel, we will deport you. Then you go, okay, that doesn't make any sense. And if there's already a nascent, existing, long-standing version of anti-Semitism that says, like, Jews control the organs of power, the media, the banking system, and all this stuff, you're going to find yourself thinking that ideology is correct. We've pushed people basically to this position with the way that we have refused to acknowledge some of these issues.
A lot of this comes up in the context of young white men being very, embracing of fascism. And we talk about the manosphere as like kind of a separate realm, but I wonder if you see like a handshake between the kind of like masculinity that is championed on the right, and like whether there's a cross-pollination with like fascist tendencies, or how you see that. Like, what is it about Nazism or fascism that is so attractive to men who seem lost and in need of like identity? I mean, I guess I'm answering, I actually feel like I know what the answer to this is, but like, can you separate the two? Can there be like, I mean, because you talk a lot about masculinity, and people look to you towards like an alternative form of masculinity that doesn't play footsie with fascism. Yeah. And I kind of wonder, like, okay, so unwind that a little bit for me. And like, how do you kind of be relevant in the manosphere and reject those tenets?
I think it stems from insecurity.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the dispossessed masses that are seeking answers, and a lot of insecure men have been able to basically shift their attention over to some form of systemic analysis that takes away responsibility from them by finding different targets. It's feminism. It's women in general that have wronged you. It's a sense of entitlement not meeting, and the expectations that you have not meeting with the reality that you're experiencing. And in that moment of crisis, in that moment of conflict, a lot of young men find themselves seeking out answers. And because the media environment is so heavily polluted with people that say, yes, you are actually worthy. You were supposed to be the great dominator, and they took that away from you. Who took that away from you? Trans people, women, feminism,
brown people,
the liberal elites, and yes, brown people as well. And they try to reconstruct a almost nationalistic mythos in the same exact way that fascist movements did at a time when there was tremendous economic hardship, where you had a bunch of veterans, right, that went and fought this war, this great war, that they weren't getting their pensions, and they were treated as outsiders in their own countries when they'd actually lost so much. They'd seen tremendous hardship and tremendous violence, and then they come back and they felt rudderless. And these movements were like, no, we are a great nation. It's a heightened sense of self that you create in your own mind. If you're like an insecure guy, if you feel weak in your real life,
you feel lost,
then you want someone to tell you you're not actually weak. You're strong by definition because you're a fascist, or by definition you're strong because you're right wing. A lot of these guys are not. It's actually from a place of tremendous weakness that causes them to feel like, oh, well, if I say the right things, if I find myself in the throes of this like manosphere adjacent movement, then I can at least on the internet, which is where I spend most of my time, I can feel like I am a part of this like broader almost militant movement.
Yeah, like it's like it owning the libs and calling them snowflakes and trolling them on like sort of like Hitler memes is one way of feeling like increasing your own sense of self, and like you're like in
it sounds stupid, but that is
right. You're the aggressor, and then as it happens, the ideology that undergirds the like embrace of Hitler also helps make small people feel bigger, and at the expense of the people who are deemed second-class citizens in that ideology.
Yeah,
I do wonder though, like, what's the proper response? Because on some level, it's like the initial form of this is them trying to bait the libs, right, into getting like all in a tizzy and getting all twisted about it. And so what is the correct response to it, like from an online perspective?
I think it must be fought diligently and militantly if it's necessary, especially when there is like the threat of violent force, right? Like there needs to be a defensive posture against that. And I think like social stigma plays a role in this, that we are too afraid to say it plays a formative role in this. But social stigma is, I think, a good easy tool to apply in this situation where like that's weird. Like you're being a weirdo for being invested in this stuff. Like you're odd.
But like JD Vance was like, why are you giving these kids are joking around? Like, I don't want to live in a country where people can't say Hitler is awesome. I mean, I kind of do want to live in that country, but he doesn't. And like they're sort of making it an issue of free speech, right? Like they can make jokes, they can like, you know, play footsie with these ideas, but like none of this is serious. And then it becomes liberals on the defense about like political correctness or free speech or whatever.
I don't think this is necessarily even about political correctness. It's more so just like, is this what we want to do? Is this a country that we want to live in? Because jokes are fine. And a lot of context and nuance gets lost. I think one of the things that I do in my community is like I try to create a relatively safer space, but it's still a learning environment. It's dynamic. There's people of all different backgrounds coming in and saying whatever they want to do, whatever they want to say. And therefore, there are going to be instances of like microaggression, things of that nature. But I also want to always maintain that like you can be a progressive force in this country, but also still be fun to be able to sometimes even ridicule your opponents or make fun of them.
Like when you were like, I hate Republicans.
Yeah, but it's true. But like there's some truth to that. But I'm also like, you know, obviously joking. And the thing is, when you do that, the same reactionary forces that sit around and say we love free speech will then very quickly turn around and demand your deplatforming. I, on the left, get there's so much advocacy around trying to deplatform me all the time. And it's oftentimes by the right. It's most commonly by the right. Like the whole, even the America Deserved 9/11 moment, right? From 2019, where I'm talking about the concept of blowback. But of course, I'm, you know, not using the best language to describe this situation was an initiative that was, you know, that made its way to Fox News. And Fox News was doing a 48-hour news coverage on it. They're still doing it 6 years later because, you know, the Cuomo campaign decided this was a viable line of attack.
America deserved 9/11, dude.
That's Zohran's buddy, Hasan Piker, saying we deserve 9/11. It's a disgrace to every life lost.
It was not. It was a major failure, which I could have told them. They should have given me the $3.5 million instead.
Woulda, shoulda, coulda, Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah, shouts out to Michael Bloomberg for that one, and also the other major donors. But like that, what is that if not the exact same thing that conservatives rail against? There is this
snowflake
hypocrisy.
thing really is applicable way more to the right at this point than the left.
But that's always been the case. Cancel culture was so successfully presented as this like leftist liberal thing when in fact both sides always do it and they always weaponize it against their ideological opponents. But I think there was only one side that was actually taking ownership over it, and that was the liberals.
Yeah.
And therefore, a lot of people in the margins, a lot of people that are, that are self-described apolitical, don't care about politics, saw that and were like, yeah, you're right. The SJWO compilations do show this imbalance where it is the left that's trying to cancel. It is the left that is like the HR, and that did create a lot of animosity towards whatever is the left.
Runaway Country is brought to you by ZBiotics. Your gut is gearing up for the real challenge. I know mine is. Thanksgiving feasting, festive cocktails, little cranberry vodka, and the just one more toasts that come with the holiday season. That is why I have stocked up on ZBiotics pre-alcohol. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's a buildup of this byproduct and not dehydration that is to blame for rough days after drinking. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you will feel your best tomorrow. I gotta say, I am gearing up for the holidays. It's something we do. I'm not one of those people that puts a Christmas tree out on November 1st, but we like a celebration in the Wagner house. We like festivity. We like a celebratory pop of champagne here and there. We like inviting friends over for drinks. We like, we like a dip. And in preparation for all this holiday festivities, I have also stocked up on prebiotics. I'm not even kidding. I might put them on ice and serve them like a cute pre-app just because I want everybody to feel good the next day and be a functional adult the next day. I know I want to be a functional adult. For real, that's a true story. Whether you are raising a glass on Turkey Day, whether you are catching up with old friends, or just winding down with a glass of wine after a long week, that next morning still matters. So do not forget to drink a pre-alcohol. Go to zbiotics.com/Alex to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Alex at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you are unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/Alex and use the code ALEX at checkout for 15% off. This podcast is supported by the Defending Our Neighbors Fund. Across the country, immigrants are facing family separation, wrongful detention, and deportation without due process or access to legal support. In 2024 alone, there were more than 2.5 million immigration court cases without legal representation. That means millions of people were denied the most basic protection we expect from our justice system, the right to a fair process. Powered by people like you, the Defending Our Neighbors Fund is providing access to life-saving legal aid to families in crisis, but they urgently need your help to meet unprecedented demand. The government is pouring billions of taxpayer dollars into enforcement while slashing funding for legal aid, and that makes your support more urgent than ever. Help defend your neighbors and keep families together. Donate now at defendingourneighbors.org/fund. I got to ask you, because we were talking about Nazis and the left and the right versus the left, but do you have thoughts on Graham Platner and his tattoo?
Oh my God. I don't even know where to begin with that one. So, Graham Platner is a very unique case, at least from my perspective, because he is a through and through Bernie-crat, right? Like, he is a Bernie hand-selected pick who was running for office, and right out of the gates, he was like, I'm anti-Israel. I don't think we should be giving weapons to Israel. I don't think we should be doing anything with Israel if they're going to continue doing a genocide, right? And that was a unique position. And then on top of that, he was pro-Medicare for all and numerous other Bernie-style positions. And what was interesting to me about that whole saga is that in spite of him being very obviously a grunt force, machine gunner for the Marines, which are sometimes known as crayon eaters for good reason. He went on shore leave in Croatia and split and got the most obvious Nazi tattoo, the third most common Nazi symbol, a Totenkopf, on his chest. In spite of that, Maynard seemingly didn't care about that situation at all. And I think that's a really interesting moment in American politics for where the liberal base is moving. Yeah. Because for far too long, I think the organs that work alongside the Democratic Party that are liberal adjacent or, left adjacent, whatever you want to call it, have often weaponized a version of identity against the left flank, right? While simultaneously telling their audiences that electability actually revolves around moderates. Moderate positions are how you win. Yeah. And this is actually a real battle that is still currently taking place within the Democratic Party. The Welcome Pack piece that came out, the Welcome Pack report that came out was, again, another version of this exact same thing. And I don't think liberals are responding to that electability argument, or rather, I think they think now, after failure from the moderates, especially the second failure against Donald Trump, again, an incompetent, monstrous fascist, they realize like, no, maybe the left flank, left populist position is the actual electability argument. And maybe we were deluded.
Well, but like, okay, so
they're giving a lot of grace to Graham Platner is what I'm saying.
And I think Graham Platner has handled it basically as well as you can, which is another model of how the left can understand people's flaws and how you can own the mistakes you made in life and how they made you who you are today and arguably a better person. But like, just like, as you say, one of the top 3 Nazi tattoos, like, is that not fucked up? Like, what?
No, I think it is.
I mean, what? So,
I think
like, are liberals just becoming more okay with that? And like, is that a problem?
So
I don't know.
There's 2 things that I think about in that regard. I think that we'll see, because we saw it with Zohran Mamdani, right?
Yeah,
like,
and I want to talk to you about
a lot of liberals were very forgiving of like the faucet of misinformation and angry lines of attack that were completely, in my opinion, unjustifiable and outright racist at times. Like the notion that he is like a scary anti-Semite is honestly an incredibly permissible form of bigotry, like institutionally permissible form of bigotry. The assumption that like he's gonna be anti-Semitic, he's anti-Israel, he's Muslim, come on. Like, and these are very real fears. Like, we don't treat white supremacy in that same vein. Like if someone were to say, as a white Christian, as many have, right? I think like desegregation is a real problem. I think that I don't want my children to live in a racial jungle. We would be like, okay, that's your problem. Like, you need to deal with that on your own. But in this circumstance, because, you know, Jews are also a marginalized identity in the United States of America, and there is a lot of historic violence towards Jewish people on the virtue of being Jewish, that there is this conversation that takes place where we place a lot of emphasis on whether or not there's this like broad majority of Jewish people that are truly terrified of Zohran Mamdani because he's seemingly or considered to be anti-Semitic. And I think that's genuinely a racist position to apply to someone like Zohran Mamdani. I think it's ridiculous. He's done nothing and said nothing that is even remotely anti-Semitic. And yet
he staked out a position on Gaza that is comports, that is not in favor of what Israel is doing, but that does not mean he is an anti-Semite.
And here, I'll give you an example. Sometimes I like to think about it as like, if Zohran was like a white Christian guy or a Jewish guy, and he was saying that, would these arguments stick?
Yeah.
Would there be this much? I mean, look at Graham Platner. He's a fucking totem cov tattoo.
This is what I'm saying.
And even then, people are like not even making that argument, right?
Give him a pass.
So my point is like, that is institutionalized Islamophobia. There's a big part of it. I don't like to talk about it too much because it's like a lot of people tap out when they hear that and they're like, I don't want to hear this. Oh, whatever. Here we go again. But the reason why I'm saying it here is that like we shall see if the liberals are more forgiving of guys like Graham Platner because he's a white dude and they think that is like the primary version of electability for liberals in general.
Yeah.
Or is it because he came out of the gate swinging with very leftist, like left flank policies, and that's the reason why they're forgiving of him. And I think the contest I'm paying close attention to is Abdul El-Sayed, a person who has none of the red flags whatsoever. Another person that basically has an infallible reputation and has actually more experience in politics as well. He's run for the governors. He failed to defeat. I think it was Whitmer that he failed to defeat on a Medicare for All campaign, and he is the real deal, right? And he's also another early Bernie pick. He's also anti-Zionist. We shall see if liberals are just as forgiving of a brown guy that is running on a very similar campaign to Graham Platner.
Without the tattoo.
Yeah, without the Nazi tattoo, but he's a brown guy. Does that mean that it's like scarier? My point is a white dude with a Nazi tattoo.
I think we know the answer, don't we?
Well, I
think we know the answer.
No, I don't.
As a brown person, I think I know the answer.
No, I think that's defeatist. And that's, I don't abide by that. I recognize that there's a hurdle, right? There's a hurdle, there's a higher threshold, but you can climb it. And you can make up for that higher threshold by instilling messaging discipline and being and then not stepping on any landmines to the best of your ability, and also just focusing on issues that that the largest base actually care about. That's why I always say center the working class, because the working class, even if they don't self-identify as the working class, are the largest group in this country.
Yeah.
They're the 99%.
Well, and that's what Mamdani did, right?
Yes.
And I know you've been critical of traditional media that's focused on his kind of charisma and his communication strategy and, well, his campaign infrastructure, I think, is absolutely a legit thing to focus on. I guess that you know, people haven't focused enough on the issues that he, first of all, the big ideas he had, the innovative ideas, the issues, the policy itself, and that was the thing that actually won him the mayorship. But I do wonder, you know, as we sit here and try and figure out like the secret sauce for reclaiming the country, wasn't it necessary to have someone who was young and charismatic and great on messaging to deliver that baseline message? Like, doesn't that stuff matter? I mean, I don't mean to sound shallow.
No,
but like,
aesthetics matter. They do.
like big time, don't you think?
But again, we go back to the aesthetics that are positive, right? The optics that were positive. He's young, he's vibrant, he's dynamic, and he's a great orator, right? But also, he was visibly Muslim. He was brown. He's Muslim. He's socialist.
Yeah.
These are things that are supposed to be major hangups, right? These are things that that the DCCC is never going to look at.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, get out of here. You're done, right? And yet he had to actually overcome this incredibly crowded primary field with other candidates that were pretty good too. But again, he had to climb these additional hurdles, and he did it successfully. So it's not impossible.
Yeah.
It is real.
Just
it
takes
is a real
once
issue.
in a generation talent to do it.
No, but sometimes you got to be that person, is what I mean.
Yeah.
I think like I had this issue with Kamala Harris quite a bit. I talked to some of my wonderful friends who would always talk about like, well, it's misogyny, it's misogynoir, it's white supremacy. Like they just did not want a black woman in a position of power, and there's truth to that, of course.
Yeah.
It's a anti-blackness is fundamental in this country's politics.
So is misogyny.
Yeah, and so is misogyny, of course. And that didn't mean that it was impossible, because the alternative to that is then we only have to run white guys. And I don't care.
Well, I think some people think that's the answer for
No,
Democrats.
but I think that's ridiculous. We have to drop that idea in its entirety. We have to be much more forgiving, and we have to be more open-minded. Because America is an incredibly diverse country.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also a black man whose middle name was Hussein that was able to also win with a broad populist message as well, and also stake his campaign around being against the Iraq War in 2007 and 2008. That was a brave position to take on, in my opinion.
I do wonder, though, the country feels like it's, in a conversation with Barack Obama last night, the country's changed so much. And everything from the bifurcation of information systems to tech to what Trump's done to the national conversation and the sense of unity, that I wonder how an Obama candidacy would even work in this day and age, But I think Mamdani, I do want to get back to Mamdani.
I think it would be like a Mamdani campaign.
I mean, I think which is way more. I think the Mamdani campaign is way more out front on issue, like on complicated it. Like Obama didn't want to have to talk about race until he was forced to by the right wing, right?
Of course. No, that, I mean, neither
identity,
did Mamdani.
Yeah.
Mamdani did not, it was obvious that he's Muslim, and he would target that base, but there was never really a moment until the very last faucet of Islamophobia where he put his foot down and said guys, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. You're not only harming me, you're not only attacking me, you're attacking 1 in 8 New Yorkers that are also Muslim by constantly associating us with terrorism, with 9/11, with Islamophobia of this sort. This is ridiculous. And I think that he waited until the very last moment, just like Barack Obama did, because if you come out of the gate swinging with that, that's going to be the entire campaign.
Yeah, well, he came out swinging with democratic socialism, and that was enough of a left hook. But I mean, I guess I wonder, in the context of this conversation we're having about the left and masculinity and, how out front you can be on issues that are complicated. we know from exit polling that Mamdani did incredibly well with young men. And I wonder, as we try and understand.
Plus 40, right?
Yeah, plus 40. And also even Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill did better with men. But let's focus on Mamdani for a second because he is the man in the race. And I wonder what kind of, describe to me what kind of masculinity you think he represents.
I mean, I think he's just a guy. He's just a guy that you can hang with. And there are many people like him out there of all different backgrounds, shapes, colors, sizes. And that's what it is.
He's authentically himself. Is that the key?
He's just himself. And that's what I do as well. I'm just authentically myself. I don't care. I'll go to a gay bar. I'll do a drag thing every now and then. And that breaks the brains of so many insecure people where they're like, oh, you wore a dress. It's like, okay. Who gives a shit, right? If you're confident in your sexuality, if you're confident in your masculinity, this kind of stuff doesn't matter.
I think that's the thing people don't get. I was doing this show back in the day, and this guy was like you, tall, strapping dude who would wear pearl necklaces, and another dude just like them, they would do their nails, and they were like, and?
Yeah.
And it's something that I think politicians don't get about masculinity because they still think of it in these pretty retrograde tropes of you would never never get into makeup, or there's no femininity, there's no room for femininity. And it's the thing about the 21st century is the young dudes are way more comfortable being whatever the fuck they want to be without feeling like they need and not feeling like they need to be in a box. And someone out there politically needs to recognize that. When we talk about Mamdani and the road ahead for him, and I ask you this because I know you were at Mamdani headquarters, you're advisor, engaged supporter.
Was it engaged supporter?
Engaged
exactly.
Supporter.
I was an early booster. I try to help to the best of my ability, and I think the most impactful part of that was like I said, in the primary, getting his name in front of a lot of
people,
of organizers, and a lot of people who were excited and primed and ready to go with a candidate that represented their worldview, that was closer to their worldview. This would not work with every single campaign, though. That's what I always stress to other people. It's not like I can just activate my audience. And,
you're don't come to me.
Yeah, in the direction of Abigail Spanberger, for example, unless there is something there that is tangible, something there that people can associate with. And
what do you mean by that? Why wouldn't that work with Abigail Spanberger? Who, by the way, won by a larger margin than Zohran Mamdani and then swept the Virginia House of Delegates.
Of course.
What is it because of the moderate piece of it?
CIA, moderate. But I mean, it's a gubernatorial race, so it's a little different for sure. Because I try to explain that to people where it's when you're the governor, you just kind of have to do right by your constituents. There is no ideological, there usually that calculation is more significant than party loyalty.
Yeah.
And that's why you have, very famously Andy Bashar, for example.
Bashir,
Yeah. So, and also red governors in blue states, right?
Exactly.
So for that reason, it's a different analysis that people are making. And it was very obviously the anti-Trump vote, right? They did not want someone who was going to be Trump aligned.
And that's what I want to ask in the context of Mamdani, because the right wing is losing its fucking mind.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
And Trump has already very clearly set his sights on Mamdani, and I wonder how much we should expect him.
I think Trump will surprise you on Mamdani.
What do you mean?
I think Donald Trump reads the room a lot better than people give him credit for, or some people do give him credit for it. He sees charisma, and he likes it.
He's a
television man.
Yeah.
And I was reading, I think it was Peter Baker in the New York Times that wrote this report, and a part of that was talking about how Donald Trump behind closed doors has been speaking a very different tune about Zohran Mamdani than he is when he's speaking out against him.
I'm with you on the Trump could surprise us on Mamdani. I think he does. He respects charisma. He respects political talent. It's why he's obsessed with Barack Obama and obsessed with the comparisons. But he also has trampled on Obama's legacy, explicitly. He's had his goons at DNI investigate Obama and his, Obama is his Moby Dick in a lot of ways. I could see the same being true for Mamdani, where he privately sort of respects him as a politician and as a man, but also will use him as a foil to try and take on the Libs and New York City and try and make life hell for the people that Mamdani has to govern. So I guess I wonder, as you think about it, like how much should the left expect Mamdani to be a bulwark against Trump? And how much should the left give him space to actually just run the most complicated bureaucratic city in America?
I think that's going to happen regardless. There's going to be a lot of growing pains, and there is going to be a tremendous amount of animosity towards whatever he tries to do. It's going to happen because there are far too many advocacy groups and far too many corporate interests at play here that have been very frustrated and very fearful about even offering a crumb of hope to the working class. And Mamdani does represent that hope. His campaign was able to overcome great odds. I know we say, oh, it's New York, everyone's woke, but like that was an insane race. That took place.
It was
nationally significant, but it was also internationally significant. I have friends in LFI in France on Boud that are going crazy. Mélenchon has been talking about Zohran Mamdani over and over again. I got people in the Green Party hitting me up in the UK to be like, hey, can we get an interview with Zohran Mamdani?
Well, and it's such a counterpoint. I mean, we have exported a certain brand of like toxic American imperialism and like MAGA bullshit for, the last 8 years.
You got people in Korea wearing MAGA hats. We are polluting. We're exporting our brain rot to these other countries.
Yeah.
And you saw that with Sansaido in Japan. This America First mechanism with a white guy, by the way, who was a MAGA Trump booster that went to Japan and was a campaign advisor for this with this party called Sansaido that actually made waves. Like they actually had modestly increased their visibility in Japanese politics out of nowhere, and they were running on xenophobia and all this other stuff, which of course
you're welcome, Japan.
Of course, well, Japan is already very xenophobic, but. It was interesting to see like such an Americanized version of that.
Yeah.
Especially when their xenophobia is also not exactly kind to white people either. Like they don't want white people in the country either.
But I mean, to that end, like the reason Mamdani's victory, I think, is so relevant is because it's such a counterpoint to what people have come to expect from America. It reminds the rest of the world that we're not just this sort of singular neo-fascist entity, but that there are incredible new leaders on the horizon that offer a way more inclusive, dynamic version of this country that we thought was like basically lost.
America is the nation of contradictions, right? Like, and it is exhibited in the mind of the median voter.
Yeah,
you see it all the time. People believe inherently contradictory statements. Ask a Trump supporter if they want to build a wall and purge the nation of immigrants. They say yes. Ask them if you think people that have been here for 5 years should get amnesty and become citizens. They say, of course.
Yeah,
those are directly at odds with one another. So I think we have to. I was about to say engage in more dialectical thinking, but really, like we have to actually offer an alternative. And if the left flank party does not offer this alternative, then we find ourselves swept away by the right-wing forces and start only agreeing with the right-wing position because that's the only position that we hear. And that's why it was so damaging for the Democrats, I think, in the lead up to the election or even in the beginning of the Biden administration, to not immediately look at the table and say, we actually won on a pro-immigration stance, and we should commit to this first 100 days agenda. They should have been campaigning year-round, as the Republicans do, and they should have been creating a strong and resilient base of support on key issues that their advocacy should be centered on, instead of constantly playing defense after years and years of right-wing propaganda that they never addressed.
Yeah.
The reason why I bring this up is because it was a non-starter. Like being pro-migrant was a non-starter in this election. And that's the reason why the Democrats thought in their endless brilliance that on October 5, they could unveil this right-wing Oklahoma senator written bill that was going to be very serious about tackling the immigration crisis, where they adopted the right-wing framing that was utterly devoid of facts, that was complete manufactured hysteria, right? And they said, yes, you're right, immigrants are constituting a national security threat, but we are the serious party that's going to actually take care of this problem. When you do that, you don't actually win any votes.
Yeah, well, you cede ground to
Yeah.
the territory they
All
already
you've
own.
done is allow the country to be more right-wing until they actually see the implementation of those policies. Another thing that I constantly screamed about over and over again, I was like, this is very dangerous. Mass deportations are Nazi shit. You guys are not taking this seriously. You are not pushing back against like the dangers that immigrants present. They were too fearful to take a stand on this issue because Democrats don't believe in anything.
Well,
or at least that's the way that they look.
The upshot of the Trump years, it has forced a crystallization of beliefs and ethics. And you see these immigration dragnets, and I think it has forced Democrats to, first of all, acknowledge the contributions of immigrants, how they are the lifeblood of the American economy.
I don't think they're doing enough. I
agree with you. I completely agree with you.
I don't think the Democratic Party is. I think the base is.
Yeah.
The base is coming to that realization.
It's people seeing what's happening in their communities.
But as long as the Democrats refuse to listen to their base, they are never going to win elections. They will only eke out marginal victories here and there as we ratchet further and further into very, very dangerous right-wing territory, which we're in right now. We are in fascism territory. If you go along with the, what's his name, James Carville method of just like showing your belly and expecting results, that's how you arrive at being the less popular party at a time when there's unprecedented animosity towards the Republicans.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable.
Don't show your soft belly. Go out there and fight.
Yeah, people want fighters. And I think that's going to be
fighters who can wear pearl necklaces too.
Yeah, sure. But I think that is like the major thing that Democrats need to address. That they will put their bodies on the line. They will be leading the charge. That they're unafraid to go out in public and actually lead protests and actually make a big fuss about these issues. That's why I gave a lot of respect to Chris Van Hollen when he made the issue of Kilmar Briga Garcia consequential for the Republicans. That was a turning point. That paired up with people black bagging random neighbors off of the streets was creating a lot of animosity and a lot of discontent amongst the base. But they were not. The media wasn't covering it as much.
Yeah.
And until Chris Van Hollen was like, no, I want proof of life. This is one of my constituents. I want proof of life for Kilmar Briga Garcia. I'm down to go to El Salvador. Then it became a major issue.
Totally.
That was the turning point in the polls as well for Americans that were too busy to care about what the administration was up to because they were too busy trying to make rent.
Well, listen, you can care about affordability and the welfare of your fellow human beings. And I think that that's what the moment calls for. Hasan, it's like we could talk for 6 more hours.
Yeah.
There's a lot to cover. I hope I can talk to you again.
For sure.
It's great to get your perspective on all of this.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Keep doing what you're doing.
All right.
Maybe not the chew. I worry about your health.
Oh, the Zins?
The Zins.
You
Sorry.
see I got the Trump assassination attempt Zintin.
Of course you do.
This is a real party trick. When I go to like all the Manosphere podcasts, they love it. When I pull this out, they're like, "Oh my God."
Okay, well, good luck out there, man.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Before we go, I want to hear from you. Have you been impacted directly by the Trump administration and its policies? Maybe you've experienced changes to your job or to your healthcare or at your kid's school. If you have, I want to hear it all, whether these policies have impacted you for better or for worse. Send us an email or a 1-minute voice note at runawaycountry@crooked.com, and we may be in touch to feature your story. And thank you to everyone who has written in already. Last but not least, please do not forget to check out the show and our rapid response videos, which are awesome, on our YouTube channel, Runaway Country with Alex Wagner.